This video will explore the spiritualities of Indigenous Australians. Indigenous groups generally believe in a spiritual force or deity which created the land and the people, and remains in the land, but different groups believe in one or many different gods. Many groups depict these gods in images, or recognize gods in particular features of the landscape, such as a rock form or an animal form. An example of the landscape representing the deity can be found in a river believed to be created by the rainbow serpent, or perhaps in a depression in the earth created by the footprint of a deity. These deities are often understood to be ancestral beings. However, Indigenous people do not believe that these physical objects contain the spirit of the deity, but are representative of that deity. There is no one God that all Indigenous people believe in, although there are overlapping beliefs, particularly with neighboring groups. Two of the types of deity found in Indigenous belief systems are creation beings and ancestral beings. Firstly, creation beings, or deities who created the land and people. Secondly, ancestral beings, or deities who are the ancestors of today's Indigenous people. These beings created the laws that were passed on through time, and also taught key survival techniques, such as hunting and food collecting. The creation period, or the Dreamtime, is the time in which ancestral beings created the land. Not only were particular features of the land, such as mountains and rivers, as well as the life forms, plants, and animals, created. Aboriginal people often interpret dreams as being the memory of things that happened during this creation period. Dreams are also important because they can be a time when we are transformed back into that ancestral time. This linking of dreams to the creation period has led people to adopt the general term, the Dreamtime, in order to describe the time of creation. Some argue that the English term, the Dreamtime, should not be used because the creation period is not a specific period of time, but an ongoing state which Indigenous people continue to participate in. Some people believe that the English term used should be the dreaming, as it expresses better the timeless concept of moving from dream to reality, which in itself is an act of creation and the basis of many Aboriginal creation myths. It should be noted that none of the Aboriginal languages has a word for time. There are different Dreamtime stories, and each individual identifies with one particular story. Ancestral beings are an intrinsic part of Aboriginal belief and everyday thought. Whilst doing everyday tasks like hunting or making tools, ancestral beings who passed on this knowledge are brought to mind. Each ancestral being has its own creation story, which tells of its specific role in the creation period in creating the landscape. Each ancestral being has also played a specific role in laying down the laws for people to follow. Knowledge of the role each ancestral being has performed is contained in the songs, dances, stories, and paintings of each Indigenous group. There are also particular ceremonies that reveal knowledge of the ancestral beings. Indigenous spiritualities are tied to the place in which the people live. In Cairns, the focus is on the wet and dry, two naturally occurring seasons which have a dramatic influence on the land. The image on your screen is displayed at Jabukai Aboriginal Cultural Park and explores the relation of the wet and the dry. Not only is the natural world affected by the wet and dry, but it also affects and influences the structure of society. There are two groups of people, one represented by the wet, one by the dry. These groupings affect how the group lives, who they can marry, and so forth. The division of wet and dry also contributes to the spirituality of the people.